Electrocast. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Hold on to your butts.
We are changing the course of history as we see it. That is what Wesley demands.
Now this affects Iris. Iris, where are you?
What you feel only matters to you. I do not entertain hypotheticals. The world as it is vexing enough.
Iris, I have a tip for you.
Don't take drugs!
Or Whatever Movies with Wesley and Iris.
What up, and welcome to Or Whatever Movies. I'm your co-host, Iris, and I'm here with my older brother,
Wesley.
And today, we're talking a movie from 2024. Oh, it's Saturday night.
What?
That is Panic at the Disco, if I'm not mistaken.
So, Iris, why did you want to review Jason Reitman's Saturday Night, given that you weren't even alive for the night in question?
Yep. October 11th, 1975 predates me by just under 5 years. I'm not even a big Saturday Night Live fan, but this is Jason Reitman, whom I adore, and this was highly anticipated, and it's award season at Or Whatever Movies. Do you need other reasons?
I don't need other reasons, but I did go into it with some level of trepidation. I also like Jason Reitman very much, and I'm not too up on Saturday Night Live for this era. It's a long time ago.
Yeah, this predates you.
Well, I counted up the months to my birthday in July of 1976, and I came to a horrific realization that it's conceivable that I was conceived on the debut night of Saturday Night Live, then known as Saturday Night.
So Mom and Dad watched Saturday Night and then got it on?
I remember Dad laughing at Belushi as a samurai. And Dad, of course, being a full-blooded Japanese, he's doing all these katana demonstrations, and then he tucks his sword back into the scabbard and cuts his thumb. Dad thought that was hysterical, which couldn't fly today.
That a white dude would play an Asian dude. Isn't that what Tom Cruise did in The Last Samurai?
No, he played a white dude. The problem with that is it fell into the newly established trope of white savior. Whereas the earlier established white dude playing an Asian dude goes back as far in major movies as John Wayne as Genghis Khan.
Oof. Speaking of John Belushi, was his Weekend Update performance supposed to be funny? Actually, were any of his performances supposed to be funny? And I'm talking specifically about the difference between Saturday Night, the historical show, and then Saturday Night, the film. Neither of which were particularly funny to me, but I think it's just a generational thing.
There was a lot of pratfall type of humor and obviously still some very non-PC stuff. A lot of those people endure. So there was something there for sure. It just was, very different humor.
Okay, I mean, so the filmmakers were certainly making a point within Saturday Night, the movie, that these people were funny. That's what they were trying to demonstrate when John Belushi does the Weekend Update performance. And all the crew are laughing, and the executives don't get it, but it's because they're out of touch. Similarly, Andy Kaufman's Mighty Mouse song, the crew is like, this is funny, this is relevant. And again, the executives are like, well, okay, we don't get it, but we're hoping that millions of Americans do. And that's why Willem Dafoe is like, go live, or whatever it was he said.
Kelly said during the Andy Kaufman bit, I'm not sure I got that. And I was like, I'm not sure anyone got Andy Kaufman. How did Andy Kaufman pass the audition? Almost every major comedian that you hear about auditioned or sent in a tape at some point for Saturday Night Live. And Andy Kaufman made the grade and didn't say a word or didn't say anything useful, at least, for like 90 minutes, and then came through with the Mighty Mouse gag that got them on the air.
Again, something that I must be missing, something that must have been highly relevant and zeitgeisty to that specific generation. But while we're talking about Andy Kaufman, can we please talk about the dude from Succession, Nicholas Braun?
Okay.
Okay, see, this is my problem. If you watch Succession, then you know who Cousin Greg is. And if you know who Cousin Greg is, then you know that he is playing both the roles of Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson. And it's really confusing. Unnecessarily confusing. Why? Why in like P.T. Anderson fashion would you cast the same actor for two entirely different roles and add unnecessary confusion to your story? I'm like, wait a second. Am I missing something about the secret identity of Andy Kaufman and or Jim Henson?
So it wasn't until after the movie that I did research that I realized that Nicholas Braun played both Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson. So I'm coming from the perspective where I was completely oblivious and filled with admiration when I realized this fact.
Really? But it's because you're not familiar with Nicholas Braun. See, so there are people who are and there are people who aren't. And for the people who are, Saturday Night is very, especially if you don't have context for the historical Saturday Night Live, you're like, wait, what?
But in this way, also, I was a little bit relieved. When I saw J.K. Simmons, I was like, okay, I love J.K. Simmons. As Milton Berle, I don't really see it. J.K. Simmons as Fred Mertz, William Frawley, I don't really see it. But he's so good. I don't even know if he's Milton Berle accurate or William Frawley accurate good. I just love J.K. Simmons so much that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go with it. That's Uncle Milty. But I didn't know any of this cast, and I didn't really know anyone except Willem Dafoe and J.K. Simmons, and I was concerned that it was going to try to be funny. And we're watching actors, young actors, portray other young actors, comedians from 50 years ago who are themselves portraying characters for the show. And I was very relieved that this movie wasn't really intentionally funny or trying to be. It was the backstage terror and the pressure and the whirlwind antics of, a dozen effervescent personalities and keeping all of that in check and trying to wrangle them and rein them in for the first broadcast of a live performance. It's absurd that they didn't just go to tape and got the best takes and called it Saturday Night. Like, improv comedy is hard. And the idea that they didn't tape it until they got their footing is bizarre to me. But I was happy that this movie didn't choose to go in a different direction.
And in addition to that, these actors have to shake off all of the decades that we have with these characters, that as the actors themselves evolved, to not let that influence their performance, which is depicting, the very early stages, the planting of seeds, if you will, for these characters. That's a tricky job for sure for any of these actors. I think that the shining star or the shining example was Chevy Chase.
Yeah.
And Corey Michael Smith, I was like, that's Chevy Chase.
Chevy Chase, arguably one of the most recognizable. Dan Aykroyd, we obviously know from Ghostbusters and things, but Chevy Chase, Three Amigos and stuff, not so much for Saturday Night Live. I discovered all these guys a little bit later, but you know his face. And you know Dan Aykroyd's face, and you're never going to get it just right. You're never going to be like, oh, that guy's a dead ringer for John Belushi. And so how do you bring that through? And I think it's the voice, because I was continually astounded by how they brought these voices to embody the characters in a way that I was absolutely convinced. That is exactly the way that George Carlin sounds. Chevy Chase, eerily so that I was really transported in a way that I didn't expect.
George Carlin, of course, portrayed by, I'm surprised you didn't call him my boy, Matthew Rhys.
I was actually very surprised about that.
So these are voices that you know, faces that perhaps you're less familiar with. But what about Billy Crystal?
Again, eerie voice. And the little too tight jeans and the sweater was very Billy Crystal. Didn't look a tremendous amount, because who looks like Billy Crystal? But I was like, wow, that's fantastic. If the Golden Globes, if they have like an ensemble cast, this should win that award. Because uniformly, I was very impressed.
Yes, costuming, hair and makeup, casting, all of these departments really brought it. And so you can say, I was transported. But that aside, how did you feel about the story?
I mean, this movie is a wild glimpse into right before the performance of the first Saturday Night Live. In that respect, a very small movie, and all taking place more or less in one space. Occasionally, we'll go out on the New York streets covered in blood. We'll go to a rando mazel bar, and we'll go to out in front of 30 Rock at the ice skating rink, where for some reason nobody was skating. It did feel expansive, but it all felt really contained. It was like Aliens. They're all inside the station, but that's where everything is happening. Pacing, it was restless. It was intense. It was very much, for multiple reasons, like P.T. Anderson. We did a lot of long shots, especially the establishing of 30 Rock on that floor, roaming down the hallways, meeting everybody, meeting the llama, and then editing in that relentless sort of pounding soundtrack. It felt frenetic and hectic, like, approaching showtime. And it bugged me to no end that Lorne Michaels would swipe the board clean like 30 minutes prior to air. That's all you have to rely on. You can't wing it. Like, that's not going to inspire confidence in Willem Dafoe's character.
I definitely couldn't get over the fact that the Lorne Michaels character, as portrayed in Saturday Night, is his own worst enemy. He's wandering around, frustratingly reactionary, frustratingly indecisive. It would be one thing if I felt like the Lorne Michaels character had it together and his crew was failing him and his cast, they were in their heads and he's trying to give directions and exuding confidence. But instead, he feels like a kid who's way in over his head. And maybe that was the filmmaker's intent. Maybe that was the reality for the historical Lorne Michaels. I mean, of course, we know him now as like the gatekeeper of comedy. But he, in this, was so frustrating to me as a lead character.
Really? I thought going through this that everybody is hectic. You got Belushi being a punk. Chevy Chase is legendarily kind of a penis and gets one-upped by an even bigger penis. But I thought for the first 30 minutes, obviously it really starts to weigh on him. And when Cooper Hoffman has his moment, his glorious monologue where he kind of busts him down a few notches, I was like, Lorne Michaels is a cucumber, man. This dude is handling it very well. And it's all the way up to the fact that we're, patently implausible. You can't go live and not know if John Belushi ever got off his ass in the ice skating rink and came to join the show. Were you convinced by the time cameras rolled and it was like 37 seconds before he came through the door, which isn't what happened in real life, by the way. Were you convinced that John Belushi was on board?
No way.
Yeah, you do not go live without confirming that your lead-off talent, that the first person literally through the door, was in the building. And all that read to me as he was supremely confident and cool, and as much as people continually tried to rattle him, he was the only one keeping this movie from going off the rails into total chaos. Like, I don't like this because it's too stressful. It seems like Lorne had it together.
He's pretty inflappable. If Dick was threatening him, the Lorne character calls it out and doesn't seem phased by the threat, phased by this idea, if it was news to him, that he was being set up to fail. But he's also counting on some kind of idealistic, oblivious, I read into youthful kind of faith that this was all just going to come together.
Oh,
it didn't
for
feel
sure.
to me like Lorne Michaels had a plan.
No, and I'm not saying that he was the steadfast captain of the ship, but his calming kind of persona helped me along to where I wouldn't get bent out of shape. I can see what you're saying. He seemed very young and maybe blind to the pressure that he was actually under, probably because he was very young. So this guy, Gabriel LaBelle, did you recognize him at all?
No.
He's no stranger to massive productions and lots of pressure, having played young Steven Fableman in The Fablemans.
Oh.
And in this movie, he's older, but not a lot older. The last time I saw Cooper Hoffman, who also has been in P.T. Anderson films, and of course his dad, Philip Seymour, in lots of P.T. Anderson films. Last time I saw Cooper Hoffman, he was in high school in Licorice Pizza. Gabriel LeBurn was a little kid, also in high school in The Fablemans. Gabriel LeBurn is in his early 20s in this movie as Lorne Michaels, where in reality, Lorne Michaels was about 31 at the time that SNL went, which is still impossibly young, but he was a kid where I was like, wait, they let this kid have the reins for live nationally broadcast improv comedy? Okay.
I mean, I guess if you accept this theory that he was set up to fail, then yeah, they never really intended for this show to go live.
Yeah.
It was just this elaborate ruse to negotiate with Johnny Carson. But was that really the case, or were some executives maybe a bit more insightful than we're giving them credit for?
But it did seem like, I mean, maybe for dramatic purposes, that was the case. They were being set up, and all of a sudden, I can't believe it, the kid pulled it off. But the old guard were hugely resistant. Milton Berle was confident in his talent and his penis size, but still, he seemed defensive. And Johnny Carson seemed awfully defensive. Whereas if SNL had been positioned to utterly fail and to ruin Lorne Michaels, you'd think he would have been more confident that this upstart wouldn't have been given a chance. But he was almost outright threatening him by the end of that phone call.
That's true, which meant that he was feeling it. So speaking of Uncle Milty and P.T. Anderson, who's come up a number of times in this discussion, that was definitely like a Dirk Diggler homage, right?
Oh, yeah, I guess so. I didn't actually make the direct P.T. Anderson connection, but Milton Berle supposedly had what someone called an unusually large penis, and it was latex or whatever, and the apparatus fell out of his pants on one take, which cracked everybody up. But no. Jason Reitman says there's all kinds of things, that you embellish because obviously you weren't there. And so we made it, the best we could for dramatic purposes. And then there's the real stuff, like Milton Berle pulling his penis out. And I was like, wait, that actually happened? And according to our director, writer, producer, probably Jason Reitman, yes, that actually happened.
What? So inappropriate, but somehow not surprising for, the context in the 70s.
Do you know who Jackie was, Chevy Chase's girlfriend?
No.
That's Kaya Gerber, daughter to legendary supermodel Cindy Crawford.
No kidding.
Chevy Chase didn't strike me as the doting, faithful boyfriend or whatever, but he's all ego. They're all ego and personality. And any one of those could have been the wild card that made or broken that live broadcast.
Well, obviously, Jim Henson or Billy Crystal were non-issues. Billy Crystal, who gets cut out before going live, and it was kind of a little bit his own undoing. But my question about the Jim Henson Muppets was, why was he there if nobody wanted him? If everyone was making fun of him?
It was a reliable fallback, something for everybody. Saturday night, the true experience or whatever. Obviously, that's not what the show ultimately became. It was much more adult-focused humor. So in my mind, for the movie Saturday Night, Henson and the Muppets never appeared. Do you get the sense that they did?
I don't get the sense that they did. They were another one of those casualties of programming when he knocked all the cards off the board. My impression was that they were throwing the kitchen sink at this new variety format and realized what was in the sweet spot very late in the creative process. Realized that actually maybe Jim Henson and his Muppets are kind of dated at this point, or they're kind of not relevant to our adult humor, and somehow really didn't fit. Just like the actors themselves were kind of circling and deciding whether or not this was right for them. Like Belushi and George Carlin seemed pretty non-committal, or showed in different ways that they didn't want to be there and were kind of there for whatever ended up being their motivation. I actually don't know what their motivations were for being there.
George Carlin was there. It was a gig on a new show that was untested. So he was probably concerned about what his exposure would look like if the show was absolute garbage. Belushi, as we know, didn't fare so well. He was the cautionary tale for this cast. And yeah, he was just kind of a ticking time bomb. I don't know how difficult he was behind the scenes, but was John Belushi beloved? Or was he difficult and kind of pissy? And you went along with him because he was so obviously talented. He got the lead-off sketch for a show that has endured for 50 years. And it seems like people knew what they had, even if he didn't always know what maybe he did. Maybe he was super egotistical like Chevy Chase and felt like the Bumblebee thing was just thoroughly beneath him.
And yet spends the entire movie of Saturday Night in that ridiculous antenna headband.
Right. But also, I mean, the first thing, I think we're introduced to him. He's like, not the Bumblebee thing. And she comes in and puts the thing on his head. But I was thinking, as a big dude, that you only have so many big dude John Belushi-sized Bumblebee costumes. Not many. He's not off the rack. And so when he goes stomping around and he goes on his vision quest and Lorne Michaels has to go find him covered in blood and he's like lying down on like totally eating it on the ice rink, I'm like, dude, you're messing up the costume. And there's probably only one of those.
The one-of-a-kind bespoke Bumblebee?
That doesn't mean it was bespoke, and that doesn't mean anything.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024. Ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
It meant something to the costumers and wardrobe artists, craftspeople behind Saturday Night. They're like, we need a couple of those.
Yep. And so, we were introduced to an awful lot of people. And I'm sorry, I only know who some of these people are by name and reputation. Like I couldn't name a Gilda Radner sketch or character or other project other than SNL, except that she was part of the cast that I know by name. I'm just learning who Garrett Morris is and was. All apologies. It's my failing. But it took me a second to get acclimated to this movie and its style and everybody in it, because it was kind of a whirlwind from start to finish. Filmed, what are we calling it? Filmed in real time, I suppose, is what you're going for. And chronologically filmed to encompass minute for minute the 90 minutes leading up to the debut of the show. There was a lot going on in this little movie.
Was it chronological, though? Because Finn Wolfhard, doing Jason Reitman a solid, I assume, by playing the non-named NBC page, is standing out on the street, and then Lorne Michaels comes out and is like, how's it going? And then the flaming script comes out the window.
Right.
Was that another flaming script, or was that a scene shown to us non-sequentially?
Wasn't Lorne Michaels in the room when that script went out the window? He also wasn't covered in blood, so I think it was meant to be chronological. It seemed to work. Finn Wolfhard, doing him a solid, but Jason Reitman directed him in Ghostbusters movies. J.K. Simmons has been in almost every Jason Reitman movie, I think even one that he produced. And so we got a lot of loyalty there. Everyone got their moment, it feels like. And
yeah, I guess Finn's character gets his moment because he actually succeeds in bringing in a studio audience, but we don't exactly figure out how. Does he suddenly become very charming and get his mojo back and like haul in the best freshman studio audience or whatever?
Man, it all really comes down to that, doesn't it? If you have like an awkward or a dumb hostess at a restaurant, that's like the face of the restaurant. And that's Finn Wolfhard trying to get people into a show, a free comedy show. He's like, lots of seats available. And people are like not having it. They don't know what SNL is going to become. But for all intents and purposes, he is that show. And it doesn't seem like he was very good at bringing people in.
And this is part of my problem with Saturday Night overall. He's out there, he's struggling, and then suddenly they decide the show is going to go on, and suddenly he does have this robust, enthusiastic studio audience. And suddenly, all of these things which the filmmakers spend 90 minutes building up as problems come together. It's a little bit magical. Everything gets solved fairly magically once the cameras start to roll.
Yeah, everyone's talked about, well, it's more about time and place, but almost everyone has talked about fame and success. They can't disregard the lucky component, the component of fortune and just being in the right place at the right time, but also that you put everything on the line for a gamble and you hit. Like in roulette or whatever. It just happens to be your lucky day. And some people are positioned to where it's all or nothing on that lucky day.
All right. So that's commentary on the creative process, that there was a lot of youthful enthusiasm, maybe an inspired concept, and then some dumb luck?
It's a little bit like going to the moon. You either make it to the moon, which is a fantastic feat that nobody's ever done before at the time of Apollo 11, or everybody dies. You do not know. There's a defining moment where he's going to come through the door in flames and the whole show is going to collapse, or it's going to be a resounding success and everybody's going to be rescued. That is the magic moment where I'm glad this was a movie with a historical basis, that they actually pulled it off. So I wasn't afraid. I was just like, I grabbed a hold of the bar and I climbed aboard the train, and it was already at full speed and kind of never stopped. So more than anything, I was happy when the movie in this case and the show pulled into the station, and I was able to, say, hey, that train ride was worth it.
Is that your final rating?
It all came together in a way that I found very satisfying. It's a very good style of movie making. I think a stretch for Jason Reitman. I was thrilled by the cast and their performances in this movie. Anything that was like, that's not exactly Dan Aykroyd or Chevy Chase just got obliterated in the voices. And I was relieved that it all came together the way it did. Solid all right. It wasn't funny. The only time I laughed was the very un-PC thing that atrocities aside, the man was a wordsmith in reference to Adolf Hitler. Not a funny movie, but better in my humble estimation, because they didn't try to recreate SNL. It was all about behind the scenes. This one was dramatic and kind of hectic, and I really liked that.
I think you make an important distinction that Saturday Night the film is not a comedy. It's very much a drama. And I maybe was a little bit expecting it to be funnier. And because it wasn't, or the humor did not work for me, I found myself a little bit unsatisfied. I think because the Lorne Michaels character was directionless, that I felt like the rest of the ship was kind of meandering. I don't know, dude. I can appreciate all these things that you bring up around wardrobing, around casting, around hair and makeup, the pacing, the thrill of the ride that Jason Reitman and team create. I get all that. But ultimately, is it satisfying?
I think it has to come from the different angles. Jason Reitman said he wanted it to be for everyone, whether you're like a diehard SNL fan. They said they recreated that floor of 30 Rock down to the studs, the stairwells. People were like reacting, I used to walk in those stairwells and cry in those stairwells. Very meticulously created. But it's for those people who know SNL from the very beginning, and the people who are casual who want to know, like, I want this to be a fun movie about what happened behind the scenes. I think it covered both really nicely.
I cannot criticize Jason Reitman for the handling of this material, and I think it was ambitious, and I don't know if it was a stretch for him, but it was different than what he's done before, which I said at the top of this episode. I'm a fan of him. I'm a big fan of Jason Reitman.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that Saturday night was kind of a dud, dude. I was really excited. I had a night off, kids. I popped some popcorn. I put it on at 4:30 p.m.
See, you're at the place where some of your favorite filmmakers, if they don't conform to your favorite filmmakerness, this is going to be like a Beatles album where they're just playing, not literally playing jazz, but relative jazz. And you're like, this doesn't sound like the Beatles. This doesn't seem like Jason Reitman, but he's a new guy.
Yeah, I guess. If this was a first-time filmmaker, I'd be like, wow, this guy's got a lot of promise.
Man.
I just don't know why we have to come down one way or the other.
Okay, don't.
All right.
Jason Reitman's going to be crushed.
And that's our discussion on Saturday Night, a movie from 2024, available in theaters. If you enjoyed this discussion and you want to hear more, orwhatevermovies.com or wherever you get podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, orwhatevermovies@gmail.com, 818-350-4473. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Hi, I'm Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks. What did you do on your last Saturday night?
Did you hear something?
Toilet paper.
There's nada. The reserves have gone dry. People are hoarding it. I should have done that.
They're all out of hand sanitizer at my Target.
Mark, when did you last watch the news?
We are getting reports of forced quarantines in China, Japan, and now Italy.
You're cutting onions in half and putting them around your apartment.
Yes, exactly. It kills the COVID.
Excuse me?
Let's go. Get in.
Vamos, rápido.
Have you ever driven one of these?
Never.
I'll drive, ladies.
I've got the keys.
Excuse me, I'm lost. I'm looking for my wife. I got turned around.
Join me, Eric Roberts, Jennifer Elise Cox, and Ed Asner for The Last Saturday Night, an Electrocast podcast. You'll love it.
Electrocast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Geraldine Glass, a leader in the field of music as medicine, and I'm excited to share with you my newest release of healing sound, Pentatonic Visions, with Chris Scholler and Electrocast Records. Immerse yourself in ethereal realms where the harmonies of nature, tribal rhythms, and soundscapes blend with the crystal singing bowls. It's out now, streaming on all platforms.
Electrocast.